Why don't we get started? Good morning. Welcome to Keys to Working Productively from Home. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for being here with me and Nelson, and thanks to the Brighton Chamber for reaching out to their members to help them through this unprecedented time in our lives. Who would have ever thought in January that we'd be faced what we're facing right now? Who would have thought that the vast majority of the world is either working from home, out of work, or living a whole different lifestyle? So there really are some keys to working more productively from home, and it means taking a look at work differently. And that comes from an employee role as well as a leadership role. So 3 keys to working productively from home are really the role of planning in working from home productively, developing communication practices between work and home that work, and creating communication processes that reduce stress at home. Because quite truthfully, we can get on each other's nerves, can't we, when we're cabin fever sets in. So what are some of the major challenges you face as we go along? As Nelson said, if you have any questions, put them in the question box and he will let me know. Or you can type in some of the major challenges that you're currently having from working at home. We won't say who said what, so just put it in. And in the meantime, there have been a lot of things that I've heard from my different organizations that have been challenges to them. These include distractions. I spoke to a woman yesterday who said she had set up her office by the back door, and they have a lot of pets, and pets going in and out has been a big distraction. Children don't understand. Some of the people I talked to had 2 children 2 and under, and another one had 3 children, a set of twins and a 6-year-old, set of 3-year-old twins and a 6-year-old. And children just don't understand what's going on. Another aspect is time management. You know, it's when you go to work and come home, it's not that we're not connected with technology and people connect with you when you're home, but it's also managing your own time so that you get a break and don't suffer burnout. Motivation can be lacking. I know when this first started, I was cleaning cupboards and cleaning supplies out. And then this week I noticed there was a little lull in my motivation. So I really had to put some things in place so that next week I have scheduled a couple things that I'm going to do to keep my productivity up as well as my motivation. Another aspect or challenge to this is a lot of people are lonely. They're used to being at work, they're used to being with their friends, especially somebody who lives alone. You know, all of a sudden, I heard a joke the other day that a man looked out his window and he saw a guy talking to his dog. And he thought that was ridiculous. And he goes, and my cat and I told my cat about it and we laughed incredibly. So, I mean, people can be lonely, as well as the major challenges are the environment in which you work. Nelson, did anybody else put in any challenges that they're having?
No questions yet, thank you.
Okay. So solution 1 is really about developing a plan to be more productive. And this means having a conversation with the people in your life. Even if you live alone, if you have relatives who are calling constantly or trying to get you to do things that are difficult at this time, you need to develop a plan about how you're going to accomplish your work. And it may mean having a conversation. Especially young children just don't understand. They see mom and dad are home and they think, wow, it's vacation. And so you need to have conversation and discuss your needs with your family. Now, this may mean that you have to get creative. One of the individuals I spoke with, his wife works in the morning and he watches the children. And then he works in the afternoon and she does. And then after the kids go to bed, they make up any work that didn't get done. And they've discussed this with their leader, and their leader's on board with that. So it may mean leaders taking a different look at how people are held accountable. Another thing, you may have to set up some rules with the kids. People said, find a corner away from distractions. With little kids, maybe you have to put tape down and just say, this is mom or dad's office. And while I'm working, please. And one person said, unless you're bleeding profusely, don't interrupt. You also need to make sure that somebody's watching them and that they're safe. Next, create an office environment, not only away from the chaos, but set it up so that you can get work done. A computer, make sure you have the supplies that you need. Make sure that things are organized, more organized than usual probably because of the external distractions, and keeping it organized. If you had seen my office last week when I was sorting out, it was nothing but organized. But today I've had time to go through some things and put things in place so that it's easier to work. And I actually know where things are. Usually my assistant cleans the supply cupboard. And as I was doing it, I thought it's a good thing I'm cleaning it out. I actually found things I had forgotten I had, and I just ordered some folders, not realizing I had a whole box of them in there. So organize your space and create time for you to work. That also means taking lunch and breaks, getting away from the work area. People can burn out, and because there's no distinction between work and home, it all blends in together, so that you find yourself, at work 24 hours a day. So you really have to shut off the computer, shut off the phone. And if your workplace is aware that you're going to do that, and really give yourself a break. A lot of people are really turning to mindfulness tapes. I started meditating and doing mindfulness work last fall, and it was actually one of my leaders who was doing it in their workplace. And it really helps you to stay focused and helps calm anxiety. And I use Insight Timer, which is a free app, but they do have a paid one you can purchase that has 200 different meditations. And also Calm is another one that you can utilize. Another thing is, it gets real easy to get caught up in games and game apps and waste a lot of time. The people who stay productive now will get through this the best. And so it really is about minimizing distractions as best you can. And keep your phone on silent. Doesn't mean shut it off. It means keep it on silent so it's not ringing. And also, excuse me, another thing is your email notifications. Try to shut them down, because that can cause a lot of distraction too. So it really means putting a plan in place and sticking with it. Giving yourself a break on the weekend. Don't work 24/7. And don't not give yourself the time to be yourself. Stress breaks down your immune system, and we all need to stay safe at this time. So spend some time with yourself, meditating, exercising, walking. There's been a lot of jokes about the COVID-15, much like the freshman 15 with school. And so watch what you're eating and doing and try to stay as healthy as possible. So that's one thing, is really developing a workplace that works, and a plan to make it work. Secondly, develop communication between work and home. You know, determine how you're going to communicate with the workplace. Gratefully today, we have a lot of technology and a lot of ways to stay connected. Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams. One of my organizations had 3 different ones going at one time, and they found it was very stressful because people could ask questions through these various modalities, and people were getting really stressed. So it's helpful to pick one type of technology and go with it. Remote experts, make sure that you talk to people who have worked remotely and can give you some ideas about how to utilize, not only utilize the technology, but utilize it to its fullest capacity. As I said, try to use a single source, but when you're having online meetings, it's important that you still do a lot of the things that you should have been doing before. And that means having an agenda, sticking to the agenda, making sure everybody has the opportunity to communicate. I was speaking to one of my executives last week who is an introvert, and she said when everybody isn't on a certain technology utilizing video, if some people are only connected by phone, they can't see who's talking. So she said people ended up talking over one another, and it was very frustrating, very stressful, and non-productive. So if everybody is on via video, and it's also helpful if you have a headset, because that cuts out a lot of the distraction. Give each other the time to communicate. And if you're communicating with your supervisor, there are certain things that you really need to get clear with them as well. For example, clear goals. Your goals may have changed now. Clarify the hours you're going to work. And what are the metrics? How are you going to be measured? How are your results going to be measured? One of the things that's interesting, one of my manufacturing firms, once they went remotely with the office people, all of a sudden, they found holes in roles and responsibilities. And it was a plus because they're going to change that so that everybody is clear about roles and responsibilities and know who is supposed to do what. So as an employee, you really need to ask those questions. You know, what are your roles and responsibilities? When you're communicating with your leader, talk to them about what you're working on and where you need help or any barriers that they can help you with. Likewise, if you're a leader, set up ways to communicate with your people to keep them on track. And above all, emotional support, not only for your employees, but for each other. Reach out to your coworkers. You know, I'm in a CEO roundtable, and I reached out to some of the people on the call, and they were very grateful. You know, they're not used to being home all the time, and they're not used to not having somebody to talk to. So they were very, very grateful that I reached out. So reach out to some of your coworkers. Just say, how are you doing? Thinking about you, wondering how you're managing. And people need to know that they care. Whoops. Thirdly, one of the areas that really people need to work on is understanding their frustrations. This is a new normal. This is not anything that people had planned on, and this is not anything that comes easily. People are not used to being home 24 hours a day. So people tend to get on each other's nerves. It's stressful. I myself, I mean, my husband and I rarely disagree, rarely argue, and I found myself being snarky last week. I thought it was pretty funny because I do this for a living, but quite truthfully, this is different. So family members' stress may be caused by loneliness. They had other people that they used to reach out to. Introverts and extroverts. Extroverts really need that social interaction. Cabin fever may be setting in. So it really means having conversations, because over time your stress may increase. And when little things aren't addressed, things get worse. Every relationship we have is like a dance. We act and react to one another. You've said the same things to the same people over and over and over again, haven't you? So sometimes when we don't talk about things, when they annoy us, a little scar tissue forms, and then something else happens and we don't discuss it, and a little more scar tissue forms, and more and more and more. And then all of a sudden something small happens and somebody explodes. They have a nuclear reaction to a firecracker event. And people are standing around saying, what's the big deal? Why are they so upset? This is all that happened. The truth is, they're not upset over what just happened. They're upset because something happened again. So over time, your stress may increase. So it's important that you address small things as they occur. But how you address it goes a long way to determine the results that you get. Communicate quickly when anxiety rises. When you first get that, and everybody has a place in their body where they feel the stress. It may be your stomach, it may be your throat, it may be your chest. So when you're starting to get a little anxious or annoyed. So it's really important that you communicate to the people about how you're feeling. But of all of the ways that you communicate, people always focus on the words they're going to say. And quite truthfully, when you're talking about emotional issues, only 7 to 10% of the message comes through the words you say. The other percentage, 53%, comes through the tone of voice, and 38% comes through body language. Now, I'm not sure, I may have switched those two statistics, but the point is, the vast majority, up to 93%, comes through the way it's delivered. So don't wait till you're so frustrated that it comes out sideways. Talk to the person in a tone that they can hear. Now, the interesting thing is, when we get upset, the signal actually goes through our brain, through the limbic center, where the emotions are stored, before it ever gets to the rational side of your brain. And that's very often why you say something and go, oh, shouldn't have said that. But you can change it by just slowing down ever so briefly and thinking through about how you're going to communicate. So at tone, somebody determines whether you're for them or against them. And because it goes through your brain and hits the emotional center first, very often it affects your tone and it affects what people hear. Another thing you shouldn't do is don't use always and never. Those are rarely accurate. You say to somebody, you never do this. You always do this. Well, that's usually not true. So avoid always and never. Another thing is, instead of saying but, I love you, but, you're a good employee, but, you're a good friend, but. The minute you say but, it negates the first part of the sentence. So when you communicate, instead of saying but, say and. You're a good employee and I need you to do something differently. I love you and something you said frustrated me and I'd like to talk to you about it. Another thing is listen to understand. Most often we don't. We don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. We wait till they stop for 1 second so we can jump in. and say what it is that we hope to get our point across. Excuse me. So listen to understand. Make sure, sorry. Listen to understand. Try to understand what the other person's feeling. Try to get under the words to the emotions. That's how you can, because people won't move on. If people are upset with you, they won't move on until they understand that you get how they felt when you did something. So try to dig down to the emotions and how they might feel. Another thing, one of my favorite tools when it comes to communication is when I teach leadership development and different aspects of communication, I hand out Q-tips and I tell them it's one of the most important relationship tools. They say, how so? And I've heard people say, I clean my ears, I should clean my ears and listen more. Well, yes. But besides that, Q-tip stands for quit taking it personally. It's an acronym. Because very often we get upset about things and it wasn't the person's intent. I was just working with a client yesterday where an executive and an engineer had a huge falling out to the point that they avoided one another and couldn't work together. And one put a harassment claim in on the other. Interestingly enough, there were 4 misperceptions that came up when I sat down with them and we peeled back the layers. So you really need to peel back the layers and understand how people felt when you did something. And once you hear that, take responsibility. I mean, you don't make people feel anything, and we're going to talk more about that. But take responsibility and change what you can change. As I said, every relationship's like a dance. And you can get farther by looking at yourself and how you can do things differently. And if you think of that analogy, if one person changes their dance step, the other person has to change as well. Think through your desired outcome and say to yourself, is what I'm about to say going to move us closer to a good relationship or farther apart? Because most often we shoot from the hip and it causes more problems. And you can never, ever take back words. It's like putting toothpaste back into a toothpaste container after it's been squeezed out. It's not going to work. So think through your desired outcome and what you're trying to accomplish. And one of the best ways is to understand what truly pushes your buttons. That's what we're going to talk about next. And when I tell people that this is something that I work on, people say, oh, I need that. So what are buttons? I'm going to ask, does anybody know, can they put in the question and answer, what are buttons? Give you a second to do that. Anybody write anything, Nelson?
No, not yet.
Okay, I'm going to go on, and when they do, just put it up, please. Buttons.
Well, let me just say, Tina says personal hotspots that people have.
Absolutely. And they are personal hotspots. Thank you, Tina.
And John says those things that people say or do that set you off.
Ah, isn't that the truth?
And Tina follows up with reactional.
Nice. Thank you. Well, buttons are actually situations that we remember from the past. They're stored in our brain, and when someone says or does something similar, it creates internal feelings which feel real and like they're happening right now. The important thing is dealing with those feelings. What happens when you don't deal with the feelings? Well, a number of things happen. Not only do things get worse, not only do relationships fail, we can get sick. People internalize things and it can make them sick. So it really is important to have those important conversations with others to help them understand, where you're coming from. So I thought it might be helpful to cover the ABCs of button pushing. So I want you to think, I'm not going to ask you anything about it, but I want you to think, what behaviors does a person do that really pushes your buttons? And write them down. Write down the behaviors. And then write down how they make you feel or act. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Again, I'm not going to ask you to tell anyone. Okay, now my question for you is, did what the person do create the behaviors and feelings that you have? And everyone normally says, yep, they did. He said that and I got annoyed, and the reason I got annoyed is what he said. The truth of the matter is, it is not anything that anybody else says or does that pushes your buttons. With the ABCs of button pushing, it's what you do at B that pushes your buttons. A's don't cause C's. B's interact with A's to cause C's. We tell ourselves a story about what just happened. So say, for example, that you have a big presentation and you're driving to work and you left with a lot of time to get there, but you go around that corner on the expressway and all of a sudden there's standstill traffic and you are between exits. You can't go anyplace. You're in the middle lane. You're stuck. How might you feel and react? Well, I've heard all sorts of, when I ask that question, when I'm doing leadership development, they say, have you ever seen somebody drive up the side of a road, half hanging off the median? And I've heard swear, I've heard get angry and everything. Well, the traffic jam didn't cause those feelings. What caused those feelings is the story you told yourself about what was going on. Think about what that story might be. The story might be, I'm going to be late. It'll have a horrible effect on my reputation. People will look at me differently. My boss will be upset. Oh my gosh, my boss will be upset. We might lose a client. All of those things churning in your head are what cause your reaction. And that's good news, because if you cause your reaction, you can stop that reaction too, or think of it differently. And often I ask people in a session, is there anybody here who used to get upset in heavy traffic and no longer does? And myself included, I don't get upset anymore. And there's always one or two people who say they no longer get upset. And I said, well, that proves the point. If it were the traffic that causes the emotions, then everybody would have the same reaction, but it's not. It's the story we tell ourselves. Now go back to what upset you and how you feel and behave when that happens. So I want you to think to yourself, what is the story you tell yourself about what just happened that causes that reaction? So moving forward, when somebody upsets you, be it at home, in closed environment, a boss, somebody at work, one of your direct reports, whoever it is, whenever that happens and you feel whatever it is you feel, pause and say to yourself, What is the story I'm telling myself about what just happened? Because that tells you something about yourself, and that's something you can change. So whatever happens at A, somebody cuts you off in a meeting, somebody you go to say something and they give your idea, you're frustrated and angry. What is the story you're telling yourself at B? I'm not respected. They don't respect my opinion. They don't like my ideas. So whatever you say to yourself is something within you can change that. You can learn something about yourself and really change the way you choose to react to people. Because quit taking it personally. Q-tip. It's not about them. It's about you. Next, how do you confront a difficult situation? I always think to myself, what is the desired outcome I want to have happen here? You know, we're different people. We have different personalities. We have different upbringing. When people come to a situation, they bring to it every single life experience they have up until that point. Every single life experience. And so think through the desired outcome. And if you're about to say something, think through, for what purpose? Is what I'm about to say going to help or not? One of the things that is helpful is when people explain why they need something or why they're upset about something. And a good way, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of I language, but it's really just a tool for fill in the blanks. And it's about being a little vulnerable and talking about how you feel when somebody does something. So I feel, whatever it is, frustrated when you, and I would like you to. Again, going back to what we talked about previously, it really is about the tone of voice and the way you deliver it. And then when people do things differently, give them positive feedback. Thank them. Even if they change a little bit, say, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it, even if it's at home, the help they're giving you. I really appreciated that instead of putting your dishes in the sink, you put them in the dishwasher. At work, I really appreciated how you picked up when I wasn't available and answered that call for me. Give positive feedback, because any behavior that a person does that you want them to repeat, reinforce it, reinforce it, reinforce it. So are there any questions or thoughts about all the information that we've covered so far? Okay. So another tool that can help you to get the things that you need to be productive at work or at home is called the constructive confrontation model. And this is something I used to teach when I worked at General Motors, but I've changed the model because it really is about being aware of your feelings going in. And that wasn't part of this model, because if you're not aware of your feelings, you might change your tone of voice, you might have a negative body language, you might have come across in an aggressive manner when it's really just your nerves doing that. So the number one is to think through about confronting a person and how you're feeling about it. Once you determine your feelings, think of a non-judgmental statement of fact, something that somebody can't take personally. Instead of saying, you always, talk about what they did, whether they didn't allow you to finish your statement on a conference call, or if it's at home, something that somebody did that interrupted what you were trying to do. But one of the most important elements of the constructive confrontation model is the effect. Let them know what effect it had when they chose to behave in a particular manner. You know, when you did that, I got frustrated and I couldn't get back to work. When you chose to cut me off, I got in my head and I was thinking about uh, the effect it would have on my credibility. Or when you cut me off, I felt like you weren't interested in what I had to offer to the conversation. And then the desired changes. You know, I would like you to wait until I'm finished speaking before you come into the conversation. Or I would like you to wait until I have a break in my work at home so I can help you with your Legos or whatever it is. If you have the authority, tell them consequences of the choices. People, it's not fair not to let them know ahead of time what'll happen if they choose to do something. And then follow up with the person. Just check in with them, see how they're doing. You know, we've covered a number of things, and it really is about creating a plan about how you're going to do the work you need to do at work. It's about letting people know your responsibilities and how they can help you to achieve it. Because when you're talking to your family at home, it's really about what's in it for them. There are so many people out of work who don't have the opportunity to work at this time. And we've had friends who've lost their job, very talented people who've lost their job. And also there's people who are working partially at home and partially at work. And if you're in the healthcare or any of these essential businesses, it can get really, really frustrating. So it's important that you put a plan in place at home that allows you to be as productive as possible, but have those conversations about what you need and have them in a manner and a tone that people can hear you. Another thing, delivery. More people break down relationships because of the way they deliver a message than anything they say. So it really is about thinking through the desired outcome. And is what I'm about to say going to move us closer or farther away? It's about creating a communication plan with work. Find out how you're going to be measured. Understand, you know, when you're talking to customers, you know, talk about, and you have to customize, you have to pivot and change the way you do business because all of your customers aren't the same. Some of mine have pushed off work that we were planning to do. Some of them are going full bore and say, we need you now. So you need to pivot whatever you're doing if you're a provider, like I know you are, John, to really help individuals get what they need. And finally, you know, it really is about how you deliver the message. And it's stressful times like this. It can be really difficult. People don't know what's going to happen. People are anxious, and different people, you know, are reacting to this differently. I am not highly anxious over it. My husband, on the other hand, is. So you need to check in with people. People want to know you care. So it really is about checking in with people. And we will get through this. We're all in this together. Every single human being on the face of the earth is facing the same thing at the same time. One of the best ways, and one of those apps on Insight Timer that I listened to actually this morning, was on gratitude. Be grateful for what we have going on in our life now. There are always people worse off than we are. And reach out and help one another. Help your fellow Brighton Chamber members, help family members, help friends. Just reach out and let them know that you truly care about them. And take time for family. You know, as horrific as this situation is, I must tell you, there are some positives. There are executives who used to work 24/7 who are at home now, and all of a sudden you see them, whether on TV or on Facebook or on LinkedIn, you know, doing crafts with their kids, playing board games. I've seen more parents riding bikes with their kids than I have in a very long time. So take time for your family, but be safe and stay healthy. That's the most important part, because we will get through this, but we want you to all get through it in as positive a way as you can. I'd like to open it up for questions now. Does anybody have any questions about anything or any challenges that you're having that I might help with?
Beth, you can read the questions on your screen, or do you need me to?
No, I cannot.
Oh, well, Tina says, thank you, Beth. It was great. Please let me know if I can be of help to you, your friends, or family. Not only
Nice.
professional level, but personal as well.
Oh, nice. I also have a newsletter if anybody's interested with tips on communication. If you're interested, shoot me an email. It's right there, and or give me a call and I'll make sure you get it.
And Johnny Adams also says, this has been very helpful. Thanks, Beth.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad.
And Beth, I want to thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And Patty Taylor Brown has also been with us during most of this presentation. Thanks for attending, Patty. And we look forward to hearing from you again, and hopefully other chamber members that want to make presentations. Just send an email to nelson@brightonchamber.org with your ideas, and maybe you'll be the next presenter. So once again, thanks very much, Beth.
Oh, you are welcome. And the chamber is always looking for ways to support our members. So by all means, communicate with any of us. I'm on the e-board with Nelson. Reach out and tell us how we can help you through this challenging time that nobody expected.
Thanks very much, everybody. Stay
Take
safe.
care. Goodbye. Stay safe.